Hey everyone, welcome back to Whispers of Crime, your go-to channel for unraveling the most intense and jaw-dropping real-life crime stories. Today's story is something out of a nightmare, a love triangle you'd never expect between a wife, her husband, and her own mother. What starts as a fairy tale marriage quickly spirals into a web of betrayal, secrets, and a tragedy that no one could have ever seen coming. This episode is packed with unexpected twists and emotional turns, so if you're ready for a shocking journey, stick around. And hey, if you find yourself hooked, make sure to subscribe to Whispers of Crime so you never miss an episode like this one. Your support helps us keep bringing these crazy true stories to light. Plus, drop a comment at the end and let me know what true crime case you want to hear about next. Let's start at the beginning. David and Emily Reynolds seemed like the perfect couple. They met at Creekside College, Emily a free-spirited art student and David a confident business major. From the very start, they clicked. David was tall, handsome, and had that charismatic charm that could win anyone over. Emily, with her creative mind and gentle spirit, was everything he could have dreamed of. After graduating, they got married and settled into their hometown, Creekside. Emily became an art teacher, loved by her students and respected by her colleagues. David, meanwhile, used his connections to land a high-paying job at an investment firm. With their beautiful home in Oakwood Estates and their growing presence in the local community, everyone believed they had it all. But, as we know, life isn't always what it seems on the surface. Behind the smiles and the picture-perfect life, Emily and David were struggling. They had been trying for years to have a child, but nothing worked. The emotional toll of infertility started to strain their marriage. David buried himself in work, spending longer hours at the office, leaving Emily feeling more and more isolated. During this difficult time, Emily found comfort in her mother, Martha. Martha was a widow who had once been a world-traveling photojournalist, but after losing Emily's father, she had settled into a quiet life, tending to her garden and volunteering. She and Emily became closer than ever, spending more time together to cope with the struggles Emily was facing. But what no one knew was that David, too, was being drawn into Martha's world. It started innocently enough. David and Martha would chat during family dinners, share the occasional laugh, nothing out of the ordinary. But one autumn evening, everything changed. Emily was busy preparing for a big art exhibition at the school, so David decided to visit Martha's cottage on his own, supposedly just to check in on her. At first, it was just a friendly conversation, two people trying to cope with the emotional distance in their own ways. But as the night went on, as the wine flowed, a line was crossed. A comforting touch lingered too long. A glance was held with too much meaning. And before they knew it, something much more than a family relationship had begun. In the weeks that followed, David and Martha found more and more excuses to see each other. Martha would ask David to help fix things around the house, and David, suddenly interested in gardening, would visit more often. They were careful, but not careful enough. One evening, the affair took a passionate turn. David went to Martha's house under the pretense of fixing a leaky faucet. As they worked together in the small, cramped bathroom, their hands brushed, and that innocent touch sparked something undeniable between them. On another occasion, Martha stood close behind David, teaching him how to prune her roses, her breath warm against his neck. The temptation was overwhelming. Their secret meetings became more frequent, and eventually, during a family gathering, they found a moment to sneak away. Hidden behind the rose trellis in the garden, they kissed for the first time, their passion now impossible to contain. From that moment on, the affair consumed them both. It wasn't just physical anymore. They began imagining a future together, despite the destruction it would cause. They even justified their actions to each other, saying that their connection was special and went beyond normal rules. They convinced themselves that no one would understand what they shared. Now, Emily wasn't completely oblivious to the changes in her husband. Over time, she began to notice little things: David's distracted behavior, the odd hours he kept, the unfamiliar scent of perfume clinging to his clothes. At first, she brushed off her suspicions, thinking that maybe the stress from their infertility struggles was playing tricks on her mind. But as more and more small clues piled up, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily also noticed changes in her mother. Martha, who had always been eager to spend time with her, suddenly became distant and hard to reach. Their weekly tea dates, once a comforting ritual, became infrequent. When they did meet, Martha seemed nervous, avoiding Emily's eyes. It all became too much for Emily. She had to know the truth. Emily began investigating. Quietly, she looked through David's credit card statements and found charges for fancy restaurants and hotels he had never mentioned. She started driving by her mother's house late at night, and each time her heart sank deeper. David's car was always parked outside, even on nights when he told Emily he was working late. By this point, Emily was a shadow of her former self. Her once bright eyes were now tired, dark circles growing under them from sleepless nights. She became more withdrawn at work, her students and colleagues noticing that something was terribly wrong. But the day she had been dreading, the day that would shatter her world completely, was just around the corner. It was a Saturday, just like any other. Emily had spent the day at school, putting the finishing touches on her students' art exhibition. David had left earlier in the day, saying something vague about playing golf with clients. On her way home, Emily decided to stop by her mother's house, hoping for some comfort after a stressful week. When she pulled up to Martha's cottage, her heart stopped. David's sleek black sedan was parked outside. Emily sat frozen in her car, her mind racing. She told herself there had to be a reasonable explanation, but deep down, she already knew. Emily quietly unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The curtains were drawn, but through a small gap she could see movement. As she entered the living room, she saw them. David and Martha on the couch, in an intimate embrace, completely unaware of the world around them. For a moment, time stood still. Then, as if sensing her presence, David and Martha turned to see Emily standing there. The shock, the guilt, the shame, it was written all over their faces. Emily's cry of anguish filled the room. She demanded answers, but their apologies and weak excuses only fueled her rage. Unable to bear their presence any longer, Emily fled the cottage, driving aimlessly for hours. The scene kept replaying in her mind, over and over. The betrayal was too much to process. By the time she returned home, something inside her had snapped. When David came home later that night, he found Emily waiting for him. What followed was an intense confrontation. David, desperate to explain, began talking about how he felt neglected, how their infertility struggles had pushed him into Martha's arms. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. The images of David and her mother together played on a loop in her mind, each one more painful than the last. In a daze, Emily walked toward David's study and retrieved the handgun he kept in the drawer. When she returned to the living room, David saw the gun and backed away in fear, begging her to put it down. But Emily's mind was made up. In a blur of emotions, the gun went off. David collapsed to the floor, blood soaking through his shirt. Emily, immediately overcome with regret and horror, dropped the gun and rushed to his side, pressing her hands to the wound, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. Emily called 911, her voice shaking as she pleaded for help. When the paramedics arrived, they found David barely clinging to life. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage had been done. Emily was arrested and charged with aggravated assault. During the trial, the courtroom was divided. Some saw her as a victim of unimaginable betrayal, while others believed she had gone too far. In the end, the jury convicted her of aggravated assault, sentencing her to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. Emily's story is a tragic reminder of how betrayal can tear a family apart. The affair between David and Martha wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was the catalyst for the heartbreaking events that followed. What started as a secret love affair ended in devastation for everyone involved. If you found this story as shocking as I did, and you want to hear more true crime cases just like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise we've got plenty more stories coming that you won't want to miss. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Was Emily justified in her actions, or did she take things too far? Let me know in the comments, and if there's a true crime story you want to hear next, drop that in the comments too.